right, thank you. As Rodney mentioned, I'm not going to be talking for a full hour, but we would encourage you to ask questions as I go through the slides. So don't wait until the end with any of them. Just fire them into the chat, and Rodney will coordinate with that. Right, let's get started. So yeah, my name's Mark. I've been in the IT industry for more years than I care to remember. I came over here and co-founded Blueburra 8 years ago. We've been active in Melbourne since then. And the last 2 to 3 years, we've been focusing more on headless technology and how it can help our customers. Blueburra is a digital agency. We focus on content, commerce, and artificial intelligence. We build and design custom front ends, customer journeys across multiple systems. So we integrate multiple systems into a single front end and sort of try to build a seamless journey for the customer that sort of hides the complexities of the technology underneath. And we partner with a couple of companies in the headless space. For example, for content, for Headless CMS, we partner with Content Stack. For commerce, for headless commerce engines, we partner with Commerce Tools. And for AI, specifically chatbots and that kind of thing, we use Google's Dialogflow. It doesn't mean that these are the only platforms we support, but these are platforms that we believe are really good. We often recommend to our customers if it makes sense. So this is a bit of the agenda for this chat. I will be doing a little bit of an intro to headless for people who haven't heard of it, but a lot of you are at least a bit familiar with headless. And that intro will be quite short and won't be that much about technology. It'll be, this whole webinar is more around the sort of the people and the process aspects of headless and how headless can impact your organization around people and process. But if you really want to learn more about headless and technology, then I got a link in this slide to book a free 1-hour tech session, which we offer to everybody who's interested in learning more a bit about headless. So after the intro, I'll tell you a bit about our customers and which ones went headless and why, and which ones didn't. So that already gives you a bit of insight into some of the reasons that people adopt headless or not. And then we'll touch on if headless CMS is a good fit for your organization before looking at where we see this technology moving in the future, and then opening up for any other questions that there might be. So headless as an introduction. So the first question I guess we should ask is, headless technology relatively new, but why is it there? What's the reason for its existence? What problem is it solving? And so why would you as a business actually care about this technology? And this diagram shows the rate of change for technology, customers, and business. And I think this is something we all familiar with. The technology, the rate of change is enormous. It's rapidly increasing with things like AI and quantum computing on the horizon, set to impact and change our lives significantly, which leaves us, the customers, our individuals, are sort of one step behind technology in the usage of that. And then businesses in general are obviously trying to follow their customers and respond to what their customers want. And there's a gap between what customers are wanting and expecting due to technology change and what businesses are able to deliver. And that gap is what headless technology is all about, and it's trying to solve that gap by enabling businesses to respond to change easier, to evolve platforms quicker, to bridge that gap between what the customer is asking and what the business can deliver. So that's what the technology, I think, at the heart is all about, and why it should be of interest to your company. With regards to how that responding to change and the flexibility that headless offers, I have this sort of metaphor where we have, obviously on the left, we have headless being represented by sort of Lego, which obviously is modular and can be clicked together to build things. In this case, a penguin enclosure in a zoo. And then we have more the traditional legacy monolith kind of approach, which are the established CMS and commerce platforms, which you will be used to from the past. These platforms have evolved. The monolith platforms have evolved within organizations over time. They've grown bigger and bigger, and they were built very much with the idea in mind that they were the central platform within your organization. You know, they could do a lot. They could do it all. They were at the heart of the organization. That kind of mindset has shifted nowadays, and Headless has a different mindset. The Headless platform is no longer the core of your organization. It's just one of the platforms that you have within your organization that all need to work together. So Headless is built with the play nice philosophy in mind. And that's why sort of the idea around the Lego blocks and being able to reconstruct and reuse it sort of symbolizes that approach that Headless has versus monolith. And then the term headless itself, where does it come from? So I use this analogy to explain that a bit. On the left, we have a movie script, in this case around Zach and a bouncer. But obviously the movie can be produced. The movie script can be produced into a movie, and the way it looks and the movie that it is can be very different. In this case, I have the hangover and the bouncer. And this sort of analogy, the movie script is the content, and the movie is the front end, what you see as a moviegoer. And the movie is what you would call the head, and the content would be the platform without the head being headless. So what used to be the case in platforms, CMSs, is that the way it was displayed and the content were married together and attached on the same platform. With headless, we're actually taking the head, the front end, and decoupling it. It's no longer on the same platform as where the content is managed. So that's where the term headless comes from. All right, I hope that gave a little bit of context around headless. And I'll go into discussing why some of our customers chose to go with headless and so why some didn't. So what I've done is I've taken sort of an aggregate of some of our customers that didn't go with headless and called it customer A. So that isn't actually an existing customer, that's an aggregation of different customers that we have. And similarly, we got a number of customers that did go with headless and chose for their very reasons to go with it, and that would be customer B. And we could sort of line up and compare what the decisions were, and hopefully give you guys some insight as to questions to be asking around your organization and whether it's that headless is a good fit for you. So in terms of people in general resist change. And if you are a customer that has an internal team of experts on the current platform, then you can expect a lot more resistance to introducing something new like headless. Compare that to customers who are more greenfield, or starting up with a new digital team and building up new processes. And obviously, it's easier to introduce headless into that kind of organization. Similarly, if we look at process, some of our customers are very much around project management, waterfall, fixed price, RFPs. That's a sort of a mindset around sort of big blocks of work and controlling that very much upfront. That doesn't match as well with the headless sort of philosophy around evolving a platform and responding to change. Whereas if you compare that to some of our customers who are more agile or more startup type, they're more interested in learning and evolving and trying to try some stuff and fail and learn from that. So they'll typically be talking about a minimum viable product, building prototypes. So in that space, headless is obviously a good match. If you look at sort of the organization team structure, some of our customers don't have a very mature digital team. IT might still be under a CFO. There might be one person who's doing digital marketing as well. Headless might be overkill, might be a bit more complex than they should be managing. So in that case, it might not be that good a fit. As opposed to some customers are somewhat bigger. and are facing other challenges around like unlocking data silos, automating processes across the business. If you're in that kind of situation, then headless makes a lot more sense for the customer. In terms of ambition and roadmap, some of our customers just want a website or an online store, and headless doesn't always make the most sense in that case. There are plenty of other sort of out-of-the-box solutions that are easier for those kind of customers. But we also have customers who have to compete with a lot of competitors. They need a front end to be unique and differentiate themselves, or they have high accessibility requirements for their front end, or they have multiple systems that need to work together to give a seamless customer experience. That's a scenario where obviously headless shines. Another thing that's often a discussion point is, of course, everyone has a platform. They put potentially a lot of money in it over time to develop that. So that's a tough decision to make. Are we going to move to a new platform, redo some of that work, or are we just going to extend the existing platform because that makes more sense financially? Whereas other customers are facing an upgrade of their platform, for example, which is a regular occurring thing. It can take time and money, and they're obviously and they're wanting to get away from that. In which case, headless makes a lot of sense. Similarly, people have an existing relationship with a vendor who might have a suite of products, and they have, it's a trusted vendor, it's established, been around a long time, so there's trust relationship. Whereas some of these headless platforms and vendors are a little bit newer, maybe a bit less proven, a little bit more scary. So you get that as a reason why some customers stick with what they're doing and don't move. Similarly, but other customers are more around, no, I don't want to be stuck with a vendor. I want to be free. I want to be looking at the market. What's the best? What are the best solutions out there? I want to be using that, and they embrace a sort of multi-vendor. So these are sort of what we see in our customers and some of the reasons, and some of that might resonate with you and your organization as well and be relevant in the discussion. So is Headless CMS a good fit for your organization? Obviously, I don't know much about your organization up front, and there are many factors, obviously, that go into them. I will talk through a couple of them after this slide. But what we did is we created an online assessment. The link is here in this presentation. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. We captured all the experiences that we had with our customers and translated that into a series of questions, which hopefully will give you some ideas around topics to think about and maybe give you an outcome with some suggestions as to where you should focus on your organization with regards to whether or not a headless technology is a good fit for that. So yeah, I encourage you to definitely jump on and do that one after the webinar and see if it helps you. In terms of an example of how headless technology impacts your processes, procurement is one of those processes that is definitely changes with regards to headless technology. So in terms of you have multiple vendors, multiple parties, like in a headless CMS, you have the CMS platform, but you also have the front end, which needs to run there. And typically that might require an implementation partner. So already you're talking about two parties there, whereas you used to have one. And the more of these headless elements you integrate into your solution, the more parties you have to manage within that procurement. So that definitely changes the complexity, I guess. In terms of the cost, investment, CapEx and OpEx, it used to be you would have a license cost for X number of years. So it was pretty static, pretty locked in. Now we're talking more about subscription model, maybe monthly, and the costs might not be fixed, but actually based on your usage. So that whole model around the cost changes. Typically also these headless platforms are cloud platforms. They're shared by other customers. They're not owned by you. They are hosted globally. So this has impact on, where is your data living? So issues around security change, and also how is your platform supported? What is your SLA? This all changes when you go sort of into a headless kind of thing. So procurement is one of those processes that is has definitely is impacted. This is a slide about an example of how headless technology can impact your people side of the organization. So headless promises the idea of reusing the same content across multiple front-end channels. So, having content that is shown on your website, but maybe also in a YouTube video, or content that's being used in your call center, also being used by your chatbot on the web. That idea is great, avoiding having to do double entry of data into multiple systems. But it does require your team of content managers, so people who are managing that content, to be aware of how to set up the content in a way that it can be used for that kind of omnichannel. So that requires a bit more training and understanding about how that might work. So you might not be used to that, the people in your organization at the moment. In this example, what I've done is I've got a organization selling a fitness watch, and I got some content around the battery life. And if we look at the right, for example, you have a call center down the bottom. So people might be calling in over the phone with a question around, hey, my battery's dead. And typically there'll be a script for a call center employee to go through, asking them questions to resolve the issue. And that same script could actually be reused for your automated chatbot on your website. And that chatbot could also be just responding to frequently asked questions, which are also on your website. So if that's set up correctly, it would enable those different channels to use that same content. But it does require the people in your organization to do that. This is a term, I don't know if any of you, all of you have already heard of it, employee experience. So you've got customer experience, CX, but you also have employee experience. Definitely relevant with keeping good people on board, I guess, is how is the experience for your people working in sort of the back end of all these systems. So typically, I have here, in this case, I have Google Analytics, I have Salesforce CRM, and I've got an email marketing tool, Survey Monkey. People with employees in your organization will be logging into multiple systems already, and headless, with its sort of introduction of these building blocks, doesn't make that any easier. It will create more systems. And people will need to be trained. We'll have to be able to log into every system. We'll have to find their way to get the data they need and make the decisions they need to do their job. So it gets quite complicated. So this ties in nicely with sort of discussion of where we see this technology heading and how it addresses some of these challenges. This is a bit of a slide around what sort of we see happening in this space. So I have here a headless CMS, a headless commerce engine, a headless CRM. Now all of these platforms have their own editor front end where employees can log in and manage content or manage products or manage contacts. And what we see happening in this space is there's a consolidation occurring. So where we used to have lots and lots of small players, they're now consolidating into the bigger, more established headless solutions. And these established bigger players are building integrations out of the box for their editor backend. So that means you can log into your CMS, create a blog, but also attach product information for your commerce engine system into that blog without having to log into the commerce engine system. So there's a lot of that out of the box integration happening more and more to make life a lot easier. You can take that a step further if you go down the bottom around the idea of custom business dashboard. Because these systems are headless, an employee dashboard is just another front end. There's no difference between building a customer-facing front end or an employee-facing front end. So you can actually build dedicated portals, if you will, for your different divisions, which would enable a person to log on to their own portal, see all the data they need, and make the decisions they need without having to know anything about the complexity of all those different systems underneath. That's a big benefit, but of course it requires custom front-end development. So the other sort of movement we see is on the left is the front end as a service. So we see a lot of front-end accelerators and front-end frameworks being built and evolved that sort of speed up the time it takes to build a custom front-end, so that becomes a little bit less hairy to do. And a final thing to note is, with all these different systems providing content, if you want to create, a web page that gathers content from 3 systems, there's a fair amount of sort of orchestration required around creating the layouts. And we see a lot of evolution in the sort of orchestration platforms that allow you to plug into all these systems and then gather data from them, plug them into a sort of layout, which is then used by the front end to render that layout. So that's sort of another area where a lot of stuff is happening around orchestration. And finally, with regards to where we see this heading, we see a bit of convergence happening. As always with IT and digital, the pendulum swings one way and then it swings the other way, and then it goes back. So monolith I have here as a fixed square, but we can see that monolith is also sort of breaking the pieces of its functionality apart into sort of independent parts that work well together, and what we call a decomposed DXP. So yeah, monoliths are evolving towards that as well. And of course, the headless space, where each one was a puzzle piece, they're integrating and consolidating as well, and working towards more of a decomposed DXP offering as well. So there's definitely that happening in the market at the moment, I think. And that was it, I think. So I don't know if any of you have any questions. Now would be the time to ask them. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Marc. That was really good. And on time, exactly 20 minutes.
There you go.
I'm sure everyone appreciates that. Yeah, if you've got any guys have got any questions for that, I guess presentation to just get their mind jogging, now's probably a good time to get into some nitty gritty. If you've got some real technical questions, you want to know more, I can see that there's some people here. By the way, there's a lot of people here that know each other, Marc, so that's really cool.
That's good. Yeah.
Janine here was just wanting to keep up to date on all things headless. So I think your slide about where the technology is heading is kind of good. Is there anything else, I guess, you could add about where you see headless might be heading?
I don't. In general, I think it's all about making it a lot easier for organizations. Whereas the technology was created to solve the problem, it does bring along some other challenges, and then those are being addressed now as these platforms evolve, I think, just in general. So yeah, it will become a little bit easier over time.
Yeah. And I think also that people, and you mentioned how important, I guess, the role is in people and training and upskilling and learning more about it as well. Another question here from Paul is, how easily can content from a headless CMS be incorporated into a native iOS or Android app?
Yeah, that's a good question. And they're using your website, but you also have an app, and you want to use it, then headless is the way to go. And it's relatively easy because everything is an API, especially if you, for example, use React and then React Native for your app development. Is very similar front-end technology, so it's just almost one-to-one. So yeah, that's very easy to do. Yeah, that's a good use case for headless.
Okay, great. Kevin's got, what are the main challenges when working with headless, both technical and from the business side? This could be another webinar, but give us a couple.
Yeah, there are definitely. I would say that headless does bring, initially at least, a little bit more complexity to the picture, and initially more involvement from technical people, development, kind of skill set. So either you have that in your organization or you're working with a partner to do that. Having said that, the skills required are more generic and are not tied to a specific platform. So that's the benefit. But it does become a little bit more technical in terms of what your team or your partner would need to be aboard and across.
Yeah,
that's definitely a challenge, I think. Yeah.
A bit of upfront investment in conversation, discussions. Being on
Yeah.
the same page. Yeah. Philip has got, in the current climate, is there any greater access to abundant and more cost-effective resources for headless solutions versus monolithic?
Yeah, I think so. Because depending on the traditional monolithic kind of platforms, you would need a skill set that is not only good at front end building, but also specific on that platform, which has its own skill curve. Whereas when it's decoupled, you can tap into just the front end skill set, which is typically the biggest communities are around React and Vue at the moment. Mm-hmm. And those are platform independent, which is great, which is one of the reasons why developers also love headless, is they can learn a skill set like React and they can use it for everything as opposed to how it used to be in the past. So I think it's also headless technology is also driven by just that availability of resources, and headless actually does provide a good solution in that space.
Cool, thanks. Alan's got, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. You mentioned layout composition platforms. Can you tell us a bit more?
Yes. So a lot of the headless platforms are set up omni-channel, meaning they are not specifically designed around, for example, a website or a mobile app. So they don't really have a concept of a web page or site navigation. They would just have pieces of content. So when you want to set up your site structure and your page layouts and stuff like that, sometimes it feels a bit bare. And obviously this is a challenge that is being addressed by these kind of headless platforms, in that they are now building out their own functionality around having the content, but then sort of composing it. Okay. So I know that, and there are independent platforms who are specifically building on that as well. We work, for example, with Uniform.dev, who have a specific composition platform and personalization engine that sits on top of your CMS and your commerce engine and in other systems. So it's another independent system which allows you to construct pages and personalize them. So those kind of developments are definitely happening independently from the specific platforms or within the platforms themselves. So yeah, it's definitely evolving.
Yeah. Seems like everything's happening in the right direction.
Well, yeah, the customers will, organization will want that. So yeah.
yeah, the demand. Sachin has got, if we have multiple headless systems and we want to join data between those systems to present a front end, what would be the best or the right approach?
Well, headless.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. This is where headless shines, I guess, and is also the main reason why you would want to do that. You create a unified front end across multiple systems and hide that sort of complexity. Yeah. So they're obviously, depending on what you want, many ways to go about that. You could have your front end talk directly to the various systems, gather it, and have all the sort of composition logic in the front end code. You could look at introducing a composition platform or tool instead, which makes the front end dumber because it just asks the composition
and it just spits it out. Yeah.
Platform for give me what I'm supposed to draw instead of actually having to build it up yourself. There is the approach. I've forgotten that.
That's all right. But basically, yeah. Well, I mean, I remember working with a publishing house. Same thing. They got publishing software, stock inventory, something else, then the e-commerce, Then they had an old content management system, and they were having problems with the author bios or something, like duplicating or something. And something like this would have been a great solution where they didn't have to update it in multiple places and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. That's a big thing, driving sort of adoption of headless, avoiding that, keeping data in sync across different systems.
Yeah. All right, so another question from Elise. So we talked about omni-channel content. However, does headless perform when needing to support multiple or separate entities, like, for example, multiple websites? Does it share the content with one another, or are there any differences between headless platforms out there that you know of?
Yeah, so I mean, if you have content that's not really being shared across different solutions, and you're not using different channels per se, like, you're not using a mobile app or an in-store kiosk, or you're not using a chatbot, or you just have like a website, and each website has its own content which is not shared, then headless still works, but it does, you don't benefit from some of the stuff that headless can give you, but there's no downside per se to that either, doing this in headless. What you do, I guess, still have is the separation of the front end from the content, and the way that the resources are easier to find in just the front end space than having to have them two linked together, for example. Is there any differences between headless platforms out there that you know of? I'm not sure about that question with regards to what a lot of the headless platforms have a similar approach, but obviously there are variations in what they offer, how far they go, how much they're suited for specific niche industries or more enterprisey, or so there's a lot of variations out there depending on what you need.
Yeah, I think this one was about just the website stuff, so that was good. Thank you. Jan just asked, which headless platforms have you worked with to this date? Have you seen any differences between them, likes and dislikes? Again, I guess it would depend quite a lot to the requirements of a client's requirements, but yeah,
so we use our preferred one for sort of the more the bigger customer, more complex needs would be Content Stack. For some of our lighter customers, we use Contentful a lot, and these are definitely some of the bigger players out there at the moment. We generally played around and done market scans around a large variety of them, and done some prototyping as well with a number of them. We do sort of keep an eye on them, but these two are our most preferred ones so far, and the ones we've basically done most of our customers with at the moment.
That's good. We've got a couple more questions, and then we'll be hitting 12:40, so then we'll kind of wind it up so people can get back to what they were doing. So, but Warren asks a good question. Given headless is the approach for device agnostic delivery, is there a preferred approach in consolidating larger platform with various size headless implementations?
Wrapping my head around this question.
Is Warren, do you want to unmute yourself and kind of break it out? Are you there, Warren?
Yeah, sure, I am. Hey. So it's just with regards, obviously, Mark, obviously we work with each other. It's just a question with regards to maybe a platform that has varying different headless implementations, whether it's at a service level, application level, if there's approaches or a preferred approach in consolidating that, because obviously headless is the preferred way to get content out there and connect content through the varying pipelines. But I think sometimes there are legacy implementations that have sort of a headless layer put on top, and how does a bigger enterprise kind of consolidate that so that we're getting rid of legacy implementation and improving software and code and security, etc.
Yeah, no, definitely a good question. I understand now what you're referring to. Yeah, so definitely the whole discussion around how do you get from your current system into a headless solution is a big one, and will obviously differ per organization. But in general, what we always try to find a way is to do it incrementally in smaller steps and not in a big bang project approach, which is a nightmare. In our experience. So yeah, if you already have, an existing platform that has varying degrees of headless, yes, no, it's about carving out pieces of that and moving that onto your target future architecture, if you will, and then until there's nothing left, I hope. and it seems a trivial step. It also builds up trust in this new platform over time and allows you to experience it without throwing away everything you already have. So that's definitely what we would recommend as a general rule. Obviously, per organization, this is a challenge to discuss. Yeah.
Thanks, Warren. And last one for today, Wakas, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Most of the time, we buy a DXP and unable to use most of the features. How can Headless help with that? What is the DXP, first of all, for some people on the call?
Oh, digital experience platform. Yeah, so the sort of evolution of the CMS, I guess. It's CMS, but more on the customer experience side as well. So DXP actually, digital experience platform. Then you got the decomposable DXP as well. Okay, anyway. So yeah, I'm happy you asked this one, Wakas. I hope I pronounced that correctly, because this is one of the survey questions, the online assessment ones. So yeah, that is typically something we experience with a lot of our customers. They have a pretty good, extensive monolithic CMS with a lot of functionality in it, but they're only using actually that much, which seems a bit pity. And while we do encourage the customers to use what they have, sometimes it just makes more sense to switch it down and scale it down to what you really need. And Headless is all about that, because each independent element is focusing on what it's good at. So content management is only focusing on content and the management of it, and not about how it's displayed. Similarly, a commerce engine is focused around the checkout and the card and products, and not around how that's all displayed and shown on the site. So Headless is definitely an improvement with regards to that. Yeah.
Yep. All right, great. Thank you. Now, just for everyone, I have popped in a few links in the chat. So if you're still around, we will email everyone that's registered with these links and a copy of the presentation. So this has been also recorded, and a copy of your slides, Mark, if that's okay. So the few links that I've added into the chat, one is if you can please kindly complete the survey there. It does help us run more of these events, and we always try to make them of value to you guys. So the better the more survey completions, the more we can tweak the topic to suit you. And also I will just paste in, if anyone is looking for that online assessment tool again, there's the link there, blueburra.com.au/headless. And finally, Mark, I'll just pop in your one-on-one session. So if someone has wanting some more time, don't worry, it says 60 minutes on it. If you've got 30 minutes, I'm sure you can go with 30 minutes in double speed. But yeah, feel free to book in a one-on-one chat with Mark, especially if there was a question you couldn't ask in public and those kind of things. We find that a lot of people need to share their screens or share some back-end applications. So feel free to do that with Mark directly. Thank you, Mark, for today. And thanks for sharing your knowledge, and look forward to the next one. Thanks everyone for your time today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for coming.
And please make sure again, if you can please fill out that survey, and yeah, enjoy your rest of your lunch if there's any time left, and rest of the nice sunny day in Melbourne if you are. Thanks everyone. Bye.
All right.